the Rhinelander John Doe, also known as the Oneida County John Doe, identified as Norman John Christopher Guessler. This case starts on March 19, 1980, in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. A man went for a walk behind his property located along Highway 17 North, and it was here a man was found in a field who had likely passed from exposure due to hypothermia. He did have some visible trauma to his head. They believe that his clothing may have worked against him in the cold weather of Wisconsin. He had on black Oxford shoes that were slick at the bottom, likely leading to him slipping and falling on the frozen ground. And they think that's possible where the trauma to his head came from. None of his clothing were suited to the weather that he would have encountered at the time. They believed he came from what they describe as sugar camp, traveling by foot from Rhinelander, though they never found evidence of this or his name. As an outsider, that sounds like an actual camp, perhaps for area workers, which I'll admit I did think when I first read this. But this is actually a city. If he was making that trek, that's about a 13-mile walk or 21 kilometers, which would have been pretty brutal in what he was wearing. I pulled the weather for a few days the month prior to when he was found, as he'd been there for a while. And the weather looks like it was in the 20s and 30s Fahrenheit, or at best -7 or around 0 Celsius. That's a long walk in pretty cold temperatures. It's believed that whatever happened was accidental. His hair was gray and he had a receding hairline. He had likely worn glasses based on the marks that were on his nose, but none were found. He wore a size 12 shoe. He did have on brown fur earmuffs, which obviously may have helped some with the cold. Based on his clothing, they didn't believe probably planned to walk a far distance, so perhaps something happened. However, he did have with him a compass, so it's possible it was part of the plan. He also had with him a comb and a pink card celebrating the 89th anniversary of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. That would probably be the best clue they had as to who he was, and they were thinking he was perhaps one of those electrical workers, as his clothing appeared to be expensive. He was wearing a white metal Helbros Invincible wristwatch. And according to the article I read, these watches at the time were considered to be extremely expensive. There were 2 loose keys inside of his pockets, and because he had a calendar with him, they thought perhaps he was working a job as an electrician in the area. Thanks to Ramapo College, our John Doe was identified as Norman John Christopher Guessler. He would have been only 31 when he passed away in 1980. He had disappeared 2 months prior to being found, and in fact, he'd been reported missing at the time, on January 20th, 1980. His mother passed away in 1988 without ever knowing what Norm's fate was. His father would pass in 2001. Norm was found 340 miles or 547 kilometers from where he was last seen. Norman Guessler went unidentified for 43 years. Had he lived, he would be 75 years old today. The Daviess County John Doe, identified as Wilbur Allen Grant. This story begins in May of 2016, when a woman and a man were found close to each other on the Ohio River in Daviess County, Kentucky. The river in question forms a boundary between Kentucky and Indiana. The woman was white and appeared to be younger than the black male. The woman was identified quickly as Sarah Lindsay Ipock, who is either 29 or 30 years old, depending on which source I looked at. But the man they could not identify, and Sarah's family had no idea who he was. In fact, they weren't even sure that Sarah knew the man. Because both were found on the same day and so close together, the assumption was made that they were probably linked in some way, if not just a link to whoever did this, one person being responsible for both. Sarah was found first, and our John Doe was located a few hours later near the Evansville Marine boat ramp. Since no one could identify him, all they could do was try to get fingerprints, but then that didn't work. He'd been in the water too long. They would say that both cases were clearly foul play, but the COD was different. Sarah's COD is seen on the screen now via me showing an article that was written on the topic. I'm not sure how to sanitize that correctly for YouTube, and I don't want to take any risks. I would love to know what you think about both cases being related. Other than where they were found, there was quite a few differences. Our John Doe was older than Sarah, and there were signs that someone tried to asphyxiate him, leaving marks on his neck, but the COD was actually a wound to the back of his head. I wavered back and forth between using the recreation. It shows up on Unidentified Wiki, and I'm not seeing it anywhere else, or at least at the time when I wrote this up. I'll leave a note on the screen if I figure anything more out as I'm syncing this video together, but however, I don't see race listed at all in these newspaper articles, and this makes me think they couldn't tell his race because of the condition of his body. Unfortunately, they pull the NamUs file down when they identify the person, but it does look from that one picture, if it's on the wiki by mistake, a misidentification for race would probably make a big difference too. They thought maybe Sarah's life was the best clue, or maybe the only clue they had at the time, and the press reported that she'd been in and out of the criminal justice system in both Indiana and Kentucky. The only charge listed was burglary, but it suggested it was this or similar activities in both states. I'm not seeing any reference, though, to illegal substances or anything like that. Sarah did have some outstanding warrants when she passed, though I'm not sure what they were. The police made a comment at the time to reporters that if she was involved in criminal activity, it might make it more difficult to gather information because the police they need to speak to tend to not want to speak to the police. At the time, the sheriff's office did say anyone with information on her hopefully will identify him. But unfortunately, nothing happened, and it does appear there was maybe a misidentification as far as race. They did note that he had a scar and what's described as a fixation device near the outer edge of his eyebrow. The device was described as pins and a steel plate. His pants were size 33 by 32. It would take 7 years and DNA for Othram Labs to finally get his name through Genetic Genealogy. Wilbur Allen Grant was 55 when his life was taken. He went missing from Louisville, Kentucky, about 110 miles or 177 kilometers from where he was found. Wilbur's family reported him missing when he stopped answering his phone. If anyone has any information on who took his life or who took Sarah's life, they really need someone to come forward. Sarah, for her part, left behind 4 children and would have been 36 years old today. Both deserve justice. Please call the number on the screen if you have any information on this case. Wilbur Allen Grant went unidentified for 7 years. Had he lived, he would be 62 years old today. The Amethyst Jane Doe, also known as McLean, Texas Jane Doe, identified as Brenda Sue Guessler. A crew was out mowing the grass on the outskirts of McLean, Texas on August 12, 1999, and it was then that a woman was found hidden by weeds a mile west of the intersection of Highway 273 and Route 66. Those examining her would nickname her Amethyst Doe for the rings that she had on. Her COD was never able to even be determined, and it's possible there was foul play, but we just don't know at this time. She had brownish blonde hair and an underdeveloped right tibia and fibula, and they believe this could have been caused by polio. Her right ankle and leg had been fused with a surgical screw. They believe this likely would have caused her to limp. She had a small mouth, and 4 bottom teeth were missing. They believe she'd given birth to at least 1 child. She had some rings with clear and red stones in them that can be seen here. Her age was placed at 33 to 45 or 35 to 60, depending on the source that I looked at. This is another one that Roads to Justice funded through Othram Labs. It's sad how much we don't know about Brenda, and this always comes with the police wanting someone to come forward. I don't even have her actual age. Maybe by the time I'm able to finalize this, I will, but it's still listed as 35 to 60. I considered not showing the case, but she deserves justice, and so that's not fair either. So please call the number on the screen if you have any information on what was going on in her life. We know she'd vanished from Phoenix, which is 814 miles or 1,320 kilometers from where she was found in McLean, Texas. That alone is odd. They don't know how she got there. Brenda Sue Guessler went unidentified for 22 years. Huge thanks for watching all the way to the end, and a big thanks to all of you who consistently like and comment on the videos. Whether you leave a full comment or an emoji, it makes a huge difference. The whole dance with YouTube is hard sometimes. I gain only about 350 subs a month. So if you consistently watch my videos, maybe take a moment to subscribe. It's a huge push toward the videos being suggested to new people. The next goal is 20,000. Thanks everyone for watching. Take care of yourselves and each other.